Good evening and welcome to Thursday Night Live. My name is Brennan Barnard and I'm the Director of College Counseling at the Derryfield School in Manchester, New Hampshire, and the College Admission Program Advisor for the Making Caring Common project at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And just so you know, this is being recorded and we will send it out to all those who registered afterwards. So there will be that. And we will encourage you to put your questions in the chat. We're going to use the chat and we'll answer those as we come. We're gonna start with a number of questions and we'll do that, and then we'll jump into questions from the attendees. So we have an amazing panel from kind of all over the country here with us tonight. And I'm going to introduce them, and then I'm going to ask them to say a bit about their school and give us some things to chew on as we start off here. So I will start with Andy Borst. Andy serves as the Director of Undergraduate Admission at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign with over 20 years of experience in higher education. He has worked in various roles within higher education across multiple functions in academic affairs and student affairs at a diverse array of campuses, including a small liberal arts college, a branch campus, a mid-sized regional public university, and 2 different flagship universities. So he has seen it all. So thank you and welcome, Andy. Next, we have Kathy McDonald Davenport. Kathy has worked in Dickinson's Office of Admission for, shall I say it, Kathy? 31 years, and has served in a variety of roles ranging from admission counselor to executive director of admission, and in July of 2014 became the Dean of Admission. Kathy was appointed to Vice President for Enrollment Management and Dean of Admissions in March 2019. So constantly having to buy new name tags. Thanks for being here, Kathy. And then finally, we have Mike Keaton. Mike is the Dean of Undergraduate Admissions at Drexel University. Mike began his admissions career in 1998 as an admission counselor at Wentworth Institute of Technology. He also served as an assistant director of admission at Northeastern University before moving to Haverford College in 2001. And in 2012, Mike switched sides of the desk and spent 5 years in my role at Friends Central School as the co-director of college counseling. And in 2017, Mike decided he was going back to admission and went to Drexel University, where he is now the undergraduate Dean of Undergraduate Admission. So welcome, Mike. So as you can see, we have a whole array of institutions represented and experience, and so we'll have a great conversation tonight. Andy, I want to start off with you, and just can you give us a kind of snapshot of University of Illinois, and then sure. And then as we kind of seek to dispel the myths about college admissions and the misconceptions, can you give us one truth about college admission as you see it?
Sure. Well, greetings from the Midwest. I'm Dr. Andy Borst, Director of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of Illinois. Illinois is the large flagship located in the Midwest. Our campus is often referenced as the cradle of innovation, with our alumni creating companies like YouTube, PayPal, and Oracle, creations like the integrated circuit, flat screens, LEDs. We're located about 2 hours south of Chicago in a traditional college town community that boasts traditional Big Ten atmosphere. We admit by program in Illinois, so some of our programs are highly competitive, such as computer science and engineering, business, and most of our STEM-related fields, but other of our programs are more modest in their admissions rate. So anywhere from a 15% admit rate up to a 60% admit rate. I would say probably one truth that's relevant right now is related to testing. Within COVID, it's created some interesting dynamics of students and parents concerned about access to testing and making sure that they can take the test at all or enough and to get the right score. But one truth that we don't really talk about is students are coming from a particular set of schools that are pretty common year after year to any given institution. And we know those schools really well. We know the curriculums really well. We know what the AP classes are offered or not offered. And I would say that if you were to tell me how a student performed on their core academic courses and the type of classes that they took and the high school that they went to, we could probably guess what their SAT is within maybe 50 points. So the stretch of like, I got to take the test, I need to show how I would do, we probably know how you would do in any given year, but this isn't really a normal year. And so a lot of the panic of driving to certain locations in order to take the test, I would say is a lot of unneeded anxiety.
That's putting it lightly. Thank you. That's great. Kathy, do you want to go next?
Sure, happy to. Thanks so much. And thanks, Brennan, for hosting this evening. It's great to be with colleagues. We don't get to see each other because we're not out traveling. So thanks for bringing us together too. I'm from Dickinson College, which is located in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. We are a liberal arts and sciences school. So about 2,300 students, small private coeducational residential undergraduate four-year liberal arts college. There may be a student or two out there looking for a school like that. There are many of us out there. And so I think that the key is really understanding the mission and vision of a school. And, you know, from our founding back in 1783, you know, our mission and vision is to create an educated citizenry for what then was the new democracy, but I think we could say we still have the democracy, and to also to prepare students for you know, lives of service and the common good. And so I think, you know, we live our mission on a daily basis, international global perspectives, looking at civic action and learning, and looking at, you know, really working hand in hand with applied learning with faculty and the work that they're doing. I mentioned that we are remote for this semester, but that has not changed one bit how our faculty are teaching, how our students are connecting and learning. We're doing all we can, you know, in keeping students safe, keeping our community safe. And so that's been something that's a critical piece for us. One truth about college admissions, I think, you know, really is the people, are the people, you know, find the right verb there. But I do think it's very much for the folks that are on this call right now, we're real live people. You know, this isn't, you know, well, that admissions team or that admissions committee. We're real people and we take into consideration real circumstances. You know, Andy said it really well about the academic piece. And I think too, you know, the essay component, you know, we're reading those, we're getting a feel for who you are. And I think that's critical that you share our story because we're also real people as well, you know, and we're going through circumstances similar to you at this moment in time.
That's great. Thank you. All right, Mike, do you want to, I'm dying to have you play us a song at the end, maybe. that guitar in the background is just kind of teasing us.
Maybe if we have time.
All right.
Good evening, friends. I'm Mike Keaton. I'm from Drexel University, which is located in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, where lots of great things. We were founded in 1891 by a guy named A.J. Drexel, who was an interesting gentleman, wore a lot of different hats. He was a banker by trade, had a bank in New York City called Drexel and Morgan, where his partner was a young man named J.P. Morgan, who went on to do okay in banking himself. But what A.J. Drexel saw was a world that was rapidly changing due to advances in industry. And he saw how those changes in technology were affecting the industries, but he didn't see a place that was uniquely positioned to prepare men and women to not only graduate and take part in the workforce, but to become leaders in the workforce and shape the new directions of the future of work and industry. So Drexel was created with a very specific pre-professional focus. Experiential learning has always been at the core of what we do. And the hallmark of experiential learning is our co-op program, cooperative education, which we've been doing for just over 100 years. Started in 1919 in the aftermath of World War I with the engineering department, and then quickly spread to the rest of the university. And when we talk about students being on co-op, That's part of our curriculum that allows them to alternate between full-time periods of study and full-time periods of working full-time in their field for 6 months at a time, 9 to 5 or whatever the hours are, usually paid positions, median salary of about $18,000 per those 6-month terms. And our students are graduating with either 6 months to all the way up to 18 months of experience along with their degree. And a truth about college admissions, I'd say that it's a field that's often maligned, often misunderstood, often controversial, but absolutely, in this month I celebrated 22 years in the field, absolutely a field where you meet some of the best people out there who are student-centered and really care about the students that they work with. And I'm talking about from an admissions side or a college counseling side, and are absolutely educators, often thought of as purely administrators, but absolutely educators along with that administrative role.
So well said, thank you. And evidenced here tonight with our group of panelists. And I have promised not to mute anyone even if they start talking over each other. So we're safe there. I would love to, folks who are attending, feel free to start throwing questions in the chat. I would love to just start with one question for all of you, and that is kind of what role character plays in college admission, maybe in your process or in your review of applications. What's the role of character? Does anybody want to start with that one?
I'd be happy to start with that.
Okay.
You know, I think that oftentimes when we have the conversation about college admissions, we're talking about a very small subset of options. And you know, the 3 schools that are represented here are very different from each other, but one thing that they have in common, they're residential communities as well. So when we talk about admissions, oftentimes at the forefront, they're the academic and intellectual connotations of building and shaping a class, you know, and we talk about grades and test scores and curriculum and all of these academic and intellectual measures, which are absolutely important and the focal point of the process. But we are having people come to live in the residence halls and to take part in clubs, organizations, activities, and it's really about a community. So just like students don't just say, all I care about is a strong biology program and then I'm set. You know, you can go pretty much anywhere. You have lots of choices for that, but they're looking for a certain experience. They're looking for a certain community. They're looking for other students that maybe have shared interests or maybe have very different interests or backgrounds and experiences. So we're looking for the same things to build, shape, and sustain a really strong, energetic, vibrant community that's going to make the experience we provide better. So character has to play into that because it's not just about, you know, the purely academic things. It's about bringing folks together to have a shared experience on our campuses. That's
great. And where do you, maybe Kathy or Andy, where do you find evidence of that in applications? Like how does a student communicate their kind of ethical engagement or character in an application?
I mean, I would say for us, oftentimes, but not always, in the essay, in what they choose to share about themselves, you know, a critical event and how that's impacted them. You know, it doesn't always come across that way. Sometimes it comes across in the activities that they've chosen to participate in, or, you know, and they don't even have to be structured, formal, organized activities. They may be, you know, use the pandemic as an example. It may be giving more time to a neighbor, you know, that needed some assistance. And, you know, in the busyness of our lives, that maybe wouldn't have happened, but with things being paused, you know, there was a moment of, wow, I got to do some things, not because I had to, not because someone said I should, not because someone said, if you do it, you'll get into college, but there was an actual real connection point. There was a real moment of opportunity there. And I think, you know, students don't always think about those things. They're so busy looking for something that fits the right answer or the right box. And when I've done interviews throughout the summer, those are the moments I've asked students about, so things got put on pause. Tell me what you did. And that's where I can really see some of those character components coming through.
That's great. Andy, anything to add?
I think that those are great answers.
Okay.
Lots
Well,
of other questions.
Well, so yeah, so I want to stick with the essay a little because there was a question about the essay. And Andy, how many applications do you all get a year?
We had a little over 40,000 applications.
Okay, so I mean that's a good chunk, right? So what role does the essay play in your process, and how much how much energy do you give to it and all that kind of thing?
Sure. So the answer in this year is the role that the essay plays is more. So if we have no test scores and then we have grades that may have been classes that are pass fail in the second semester of the junior year, potentially in the senior year, questionable about if courses are being taught online, and it's going to be very different from school to school. That is going to put even more weight on the qualitative measures of what's written in the essay. And when we're reading essays, I would say self-awareness is a really undervalued asset for students as they're describing their setting. I'm not looking for you to be a world beater in, curing cancer in your essay. Just tell me what it's like for you as a student in your current setting, and how would it connect with if you were going to be a student on my campus.
That's great. Thanks. So let's turn to this other question from Louise here in the chat. What about ED? And how do you think ED is going to be used at your institution? Maybe, how is it used? I don't know, Kathy, if you want to talk about this, but how is it used, and will that change at all this year?
Sure. It's a great question. And one that I've had lots of conversation with other college admissions people about how some families are fully strategizing in using early decision 1 and or early decision 2. We're a school that happens to have both. We have a November 15th early decision 1 deadline and a January 15th early decision 2 deadline. But I'm also recognizing that for everything that Andy just said about, how students were completing their junior year, not being able maybe to take testing that they thought they would be able to take, not being able to be out this summer to be able to do campus visits, that they had planned to do. And so this fall, it's very possible that the numbers we would have seen in ED1 are going to happen in ED2. People just need a little more time to do whatever it is they feel to make that commitment. And I get that, I totally understand that as well. So, there's a lot of talk about some schools that had a very, very large percentage of students that requested to defer for the class of 2024. So they're kind of taking spaces in the class of 2025. And as a result, people are trying to strategize about, well, if I want any shot at all to get into that school, I should do early decision 1. Now, that doesn't mean that was a good decision to do early decision 1. They're just looking at it as, a numbers game, right? And that's what I would definitely ask, those on this webinar tonight to step back and think about, what role do you want early decision to play? Because not every student should do early decision. And I've talked to a number of families that I've said, look, from everything you've shared with me so far, it's going to be important that you compare financial aid awards, that you compare merit scholarships, that you compare, do you really want to be that far from home or that close to home? So being in the regular pool might be the better place to be. So don't use ED as a strategy if you as a family really need to consider many other factors beyond just getting in. What about paying for it? What about, some of the other pieces to that process? So, while we have early decision, I don't want people in my early decision pools that are doing it as a strategy for admission. I want them there because they've done good research, feel comfortable about their decision, and then we see how it plays out.
That's a great point. And I also think to that issue of deferrals from last year's class, and correct me if I'm wrong, any of you, but all that I've been hearing is that students who deferred from last year's class are not really going to make an impact on this year's applications. It's not, they don't need to worry about kind of playing the numbers game, because there's just as many spots available, and so that's not going to be an issue. I'm seeing a lot of head nodding, so that I'm glad I'm not talking out of turn. Mike, do you want to say anything else about kind of early applications and the role they play at Drexel?
Well, we are a place that has both early decision and early action. So early decision is pretty small for us. We haven't really seen a lot of volume with our early decision, a few hundred applications as opposed to tens of thousands in the early action realm. So, we have a lot of work to do from the beginning of November to read all of the applications and get a notification out in mid-December. But that's something that we welcome, and I'm really proud of the fact that we have the option of early decision as a binding program, but early action is non-binding. I like to see students that know that they're interested in Drexel right up front, even if they're 100% ready to commit, but that does mean something to us. We talk about building and shaping, sustaining a community. So it's great to see students that are invested and interested so early. And even if they're not, but they know enough about us to send in an application, then they still have plenty of time until May 1st, if they're admitted, to do more research, hopefully get on campus and connect with faculty and students and those of us in admissions, so that they can learn more about the place without having to commit up front.
That's great, thanks. Hey, Andy, I want to go back to one of these questions that we got at the beginning, and maybe you could talk a little bit about it, because you were saying how, at Illinois, there are some programs that are more selective than others, and you obviously have a large, number of programs. Is there, there are some kind of news stories out there about different programs getting cut, different majors getting cut at different schools, and because of budget cuts. And are you seeing that on a large level at your school or at peer schools? And how should students and families and their supporters kind of navigate those waters?
Sure. Self-selection is a powerful tool in that if you are here tonight or watching this recording later, you're doing your homework about applying to college. And students vote with their feet. They go to programs that are in high demand that lots of other students are interested in. And so it is unlikely that your student will be going into a program that is potentially at risk for budget cuts as a result of COVID. I think institutions are likely going to be going into difficult budget situations this year. I think you'll probably see institutions that are in high demand go a little bit bigger than they have in the past. But I think where we're going to see those cuts hit are in the co-curricular side much earlier than we're going to see on the academic side. And where we see academic cuts are likely programs that were hurting before. So I think that doing your homework, researching about institutions, looking at academic programs that are in high demand, you're well ahead of the game. And that's, while it is good that you're asking that question, the reality that that's going to be a negative impact for you once your choice is made is pretty slim.
You're in bigger danger if you want to play football at Occidental, right? I just read the other day that they're getting rid of their football program, and some, and a number of other schools are like you said, co-curriculars and athletic programs and things like that. There are some cuts happening in that realm. So anybody want to add anything to that about programs? Maybe Andy or I don't know, Mike, do students apply into specific programs at Drexel? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes, at Drexel, I mentioned that we've always had a very pre-professional focus, and because of that, we do have a lot of students that know exactly what they want to do. And the way we're set up, you actually start to do your major right away. So if you're doing engineering, you're doing engineering right away. I remember being at 30th Street Station my first year at Drexel and ran into one of our first year students, and she was an architecture student doing some sketching at the station her first day of class. So yes, we do have students apply directly into programs. There are some avenues for students who aren't quite sure what they want to do that can apply. So they might be doing our first year exploratory program, which has a STEM track and a non-STEM track. So basically it's like a arts and or sciences kind of experience that they can take courses across the curriculum before hopefully choosing at the end of the first year. Or if someone knows they want to do something in the liberal arts or humanities, but they aren't exactly sure what, they could do sort of undeclared humanities or sciences, and all the colleges or most of the colleges also have some type of undeclared type option where they can do sort of a baseline curriculum and then move into a specific major for that program. But yes, we do ask students to apply into a particular program right up front.
And you probably got this question a lot when you were doing college counseling, and I certainly get it a lot. And that's this kind of idea of, I think I want to study business, but I'm, if I'm applying to Drexel or I'm applying to Illinois, is it a bad idea to apply directly into the business program or in the engineering program, because those are going to be more selective and I'm not going to have as good a chance of getting in. There's that question of kind of, is it better to apply undeclared and then try to switch over to that major? And any thoughts on that?
Yeah, my advice, whether I've been on the admission side or college counseling side, I think a student being authentic is always the best way to go. And so usually my reply would be like, if you know you want to do business and you're absolutely sure, that's what you should do. Now, sometimes there's a case where maybe they'd be happy doing something else as well. And if an application allows for a second choice, it's good to use that second choice as an option. But I generally think that students should, they know exactly what they want to do. They know they want to do something as specific as engineering or business or whatever it may be. I think that's what they should apply to. And they should do a good job of researching and finding places that are going to be a good match and a good fit that have those programs. So to me, it's more important for a student to find a place that's a good match for what they want to do than to try to maneuver things and get into a place that may not be the best match. And oftentimes there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to internally transfer into those programs that they're looking for anyway. And then that's a whole other host if they don't want to be there except for that program. So I think it's just best to say what you know, if you know what you want to do, say what you want to do and apply to what it is that you want to apply to.
Right. It's not going to really serve you well if you end up getting admitted, but you can't study what you want to study, right?
Right.
Andy, anything to add from what you've seen, kind of given the varying levels of selectivity of your different colleges?
I would double down on what Mike said, and that the students who are trying to get into a program by backdooring, I'm just going to be admitted to the university and then transfer over to that program, rarely ends well for that situation. In fact, we say to students who are telling us, well, I'm just going to come to campus and then transfer, then you should probably go to a different institution. It's as difficult as it is to get in as a freshman to some of these programs, it's becoming even more difficult for on-campus students to transfer.
And Kathy, from the kind of smaller liberal arts perspective, what could you put a number on the percentage of students who apply kind of without sharing what major they're intending on studying?
Yeah, I would say we use the common application. So I think students feel compelled to fill in that box, fill in that statement about what they think they want to do. But we don't admit to that. I mean, we don't admit to a particular department or a particular program. You're admitted to the college as a whole. I would say that, about half of the students who apply really don't know exactly what they want to do. There are several programs they've done research on. They sound interesting, but until they start doing coursework in them, they're not really sure. I would say of the half who think they know what they want to do, we end up seeing half of them changing their mind after they've taken a course or two. And again, I think that is the value of having an exploratory opportunity at any college or university, right? Any program of study. You know, as Mike said, you know, if you know you want engineering, you're going to do that from the very first day you're coming in. Well, for us, if a student doesn't know they want to do engineering, I mean, we have a 3-2. We don't have engineering, but there's an opportunity for them to go somewhere else after 3 years if they figure that piece out. And so our goal is through advising, helping students figure out their authentic interests, helping them explore programs they had never had in high school. You know, there's a lot of fields of study that are not in high school. And so I think sometimes students don't even know what they don't know until they take a class in an area and it's like, oh, that was really interesting. But important to that, and I think I'm important on the parent side, is, okay, what are you going to do with that, right? Because it's like, that's great. I'm glad you found something you're interested in, but where does that go next? Because in 4 years, when you graduate, tell me where you're going to go to grad school or be employed and things like that. So we're being very intentional in working with students to help them find their authentic interest, but also seeing a variety of pathways to where can that go? How does that work? What else should you consider? And obviously that's the, you know, we don't have co-ops, but, you know, through internships, field experience, study abroad, those kinds of components really help students figure it out. Our advising center works with them up front, you know, so that it's kind of, you start here and then maybe you're going to get to about here. And we have some students that start here, and our goal is to try and get that a little wider to help them think through the possibilities and not just kind of come in with tunnel vision.
Yeah, I've seen in the 20 plus years I've been doing this, I've seen an increasing number of students feeling pressure to know what they're going to do, know what they're going to study, know what path they're going to be on. And maybe some of that, I mean, I think we saw a lot more of that after the recession, and, you know, a focus on, you know, like what am I getting out of this, and what's my future going to hold? But there's definitely been a trend in that direction. So
yeah, college is expensive. So I think there's a concern of, you know, I can't just go and figure it out, right? I mean, you know, you already mentioned 31 years in admission. So if you add a few more years, you could probably figure out when I went to college. So in the 80s, you know, there was a more flexible opportunity to go off to college and figure it out. I think now there's more of a concern. And again, I'm speaking as a parent about, you know, the cost of going to college to figure it out versus knowing a little more about what you want to do. So you're picking at least the right college, university, to have those opportunities and not have to worry about transferring or not getting into the program you want to get into from the start.
that's great.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
The word opportunities and pathways is what I think it really is all about, and finding a good match. And I think you're right. There's been a lot of, perhaps it was starting around 2008, but there's been a lot of anti-higher education rhetoric. There's been a lot of anti-liberal arts sentiments out there. And working at a R1 research university that's always had a very strong pre-professional focus, we also believe in the liberal arts. That's what set the foundation for everything that we do. And those are skills, you know, sometimes people call them soft skills, which is a silly term, I think more power skills, but they're, you know, those don't ever go style. From the time of the sophists into the 21st century, you know, the ability to be able to stand up and articulate ideas, to think critically and to creatively problem solve, that never goes away. And so I think there has been a lot of extra focus on students knowing exactly what they want to do. But actually, I think the times we're living in right now, that shouldn't be, it should be a lot less necessary than ever. A lot of these students are going to end up doing jobs that don't even exist yet. We can't have curricula on our campuses that are specifically tailored to them because they aren't even in existence. I mean, if we think about the iPhone, one single invention, and I'm more of an Android guy, but I understand the revolutionary concept of the iPhone. It's only been around since 2007, one piece of technology that's literally changed the world. And if you think about just the different iPhone covers, how many people had to design them, how many people had to be in legal offices working out the patents, who had to manufacture them, and all those things just related to one piece of technology. But when you come to our campuses, those of us that are doing a really good job, they will teach you a lot of learning how to learn, how to work with different groups of folks, learning how to be critical analyzers, and that's not going to go out of style. And you can get that at a small liberal arts college, you can get it at a private large urban research university, you can get it at a public flagship institution. There's lots of places out there, but that's what students should really be looking for, is what is the value that I can get that will give me an education that and I can continue that and carry those things with me even after I've left. That's, I think, the most important thing.
It's a great point. It's a great point. Since we're kind of talking about change and also the value of an education, I would love for you. I think one thing students sometimes struggle with is to get a sense of the values of an institution, and really as they start to, juniors, for example, that are just now kind of starting to think about looking at schools, how would you recommend that students really get a sense? Andy, maybe you could start with this one. Get a sense for what a school stands for and what's important to them and the values that they hold.
I would think that in the last 100 years, this group of students is better positioned to do that assessment than anyone before them. The COVID pandemic has revealed the things that we do really well and exposed the things that we don't do very well. And that's different by institution. And so if you're assessing a different college, look to see what they're doing in response to COVID. How are they handling for their current students? What are sort of priorities are they setting for their prospective students? How are their faculty responding to the priorities that are being put in place? I think that is very telling for the values of an institution that will be displayed for the students who are applying right now.
Any thoughts, Kathy or Mike, on kind of how to tell if a school is kind of truly mission aligned, if they what the culture is around just mission and values on campus?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, even right now, we have limited tours and so forth, but we still have the students that are leading those tours. And I think, we didn't program them to say certain things. I think they are real and true voices of what they're experiencing. They are speaking about classes and how faculty are reacting and being innovative, and everyone's experiencing challenge and frustration and opportunity and change, right? And it's a lot of push-pull, to learn a new process. And even I would probably say for Mike and Andy and for you, Brennan, that we get so accustomed to being in a certain cycle, right? And certain things happening at different times of year. I mean, we should all be out traveling. We should be with you in person right now, right? In about 3 weeks, we should all be huddled back in our offices, getting ready to read applications. And all those things will happen. They're just going to happen in different formats and in different ways. And I think, one of the questions in the chat is about how do you do better research? How do you dig deeper if your website's only going to give you surface level? And I think from my perspective, and again, we can do this because of our size, I would say, reach out to the admissions office and say, I'm trying to get several layers down on better understanding, biological anthropology. And I can't go sit in on a class, there's just certain things you can't do, but what can you do? And I think that's where a student, a faculty member. I mean, we've been doing a lot of connectors for folks because you're not just going to be able to make it happen on your own. You don't know where to start. Well, we know where to start. Call upon us. We'll help you figure it out. We'll give you some suggestions. We'll set it up. We'll set up that phone call or that opportunity maybe to sit in on a lab. It's going to be virtual, but maybe you can sit in on that lab. And our faculty have been good about that. I mean, even as they're adjusting to all these other things that they have to do, they still want that connection to the prospective students. They recognize that these are going to be people they're going to be having eventually back in the classroom, and they want to start getting to know them as well.
That's great. Mike, any thoughts on our friend Susan's question about researching specific majors, or if I'm a student who has already done a bunch of research around human factors engineering or something like that, and want to know more and want to know whether they'll be able to kind of explore that in different ways at the college level. Any thoughts on how to proceed for them as they research schools?
So just so I understand, the question is basically more about knowing more detailed information about what a curricular experience might be in a certain major at a certain school.
Yeah, and what opportunities there will be there, and
So I do think that there was a comment made about websites being surface level, but I actually think that a lot of our websites, and saying our collectively, actually have a lot of stuff that many people don't want to go that far down. That there's a lot of information if you look beyond the admission page or the first few pages of the departments. You can find almost always course catalogs. When I started in college counseling, there were still a few paper catalogs that would come in, but and I only did it for 5 years, but toward the end, there were no paper catalogs. Everything is online. And so you can actually track through and just see the courses that you would take, the listing. But then a lot of times, if you look at the department pages, there'll be more information about the other experiences that are offered. I also think that sometimes there's faculty pages, and even if there's not information about the specific faculty and their own pages, but then do research on them and find out, well, what books have they written and what kinds of things are they involved with? And then also, we're here again, in an educational role. So you can always reach out to an admission office, and some places will be more equipped and better to handle it than others, but reaching out, and the admission offices are generalists. I'm not going to be able to talk to you about biomedical engineering the way the dean of the college can, but I can put folks in touch with the dean or faculty members, or at Drexel, we have often liaisons for the different colleges and schools that aren't part of admissions, but they work hand in hand with us in the recruiting. So we can make those connections to get that additional information. But I do think that there's a lot more information that students can find on their own through researching and going through websites and just going beyond the first few clicks. There's a lot of information there.
That's great. Yeah, I've actually been also telling students to use LinkedIn and to connect with either former students from their school who might be at that college, and use those networks to connect. Even if a student at the school, at the college, is not studying what they want to study, they probably have a friend who is, that they can connect and talk with them about their experience in that discipline. That's really helpful. Andy, I know there was a question earlier about the common data set, and without, given most schools going test optional and everything like that, are you going to be reporting test scores and test averages and things like that to the common data set for next year?
So I think this is a fairly nuanced question, but I think it has implications for kind of the broader general questions about college. So we are test optional this year. We are going to report our data of the tests that get submitted to us, but it's a good similarity to class rank. So we're still reporting class rank to Common Data Set and other federal reporting agencies. However, only about 40% of our students are still reporting class rank, and that number gets less and less every year. So it's only as good as the data that gets reported to us. And then some of the other parts of the question are we hoping which students submit a test score? And the guidance that I've been saying to students is, do you feel like you have a test score in hand already today that you feel good about? If yes, then you should apply with your test scores. If you don't, and you're saying, well, I'm going to take the test again this month and I want to see how I do, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply test optional. The lawsuit that happened in the University of California system, which is about an injunction of them considering test scores, was, do test scores make it so that students get a second look? And we've put processes in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. We're not only going to admit students to our most competitive programs who decided to submit test scores. We're looking, like I said, we kind of have a good idea of how the student would perform on it anyway. So it's only going to be the students that are above that score of what they would outperform in their grades. So we're only looking at the data that's in front of us. My hope is that students just aren't putting themselves in a compromised health situation just to be able to take the test.
That's great. There's the question about merit scholarships. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, I know, Kathy, you all have gone test blind, so I'm assuming merit scholarships are not hinged to testing. Otherwise,
you are correct, Brennan.
But Andy and Mike, do you want to just kind of talk about that?
Sure. I actually I just wrote a blog about this on the Drexel admission page. You know, we decided to go test optional, I believe it was back in July. And, you know, once we made that decision, test optional for us means test optional. So, you know, we put processes in place to ensure that students without test scores are not going to be at any kind of disadvantage, not only in the admission process, but also in our merit scholarship process. So we consider every student that we're going to admit, domestic or international. If we're going to admit you, we consider you for merit scholarship money. Almost all of our students are getting something. There's a few maybe that slip by each year without any, but almost all of our admitted students are getting some kind of merit scholarship. That's going to continue whether or not they have test scores.
That's great. And again, I would just say to everybody, or Andy, did you want to add to that? Yeah, I mean, I would just say, make sure you understand the specific policies at the schools where you're applying, and ask those questions. There's Mike's blog post from Drexel's website. Yeah, I mean, the question, Andy, and maybe it's a little kind of insider baseball around the common data set and reporting information is an interesting one. And there's also, I think, a lot of questions about how the changes this year are going to impact things like rankings, right? Like the commercial rankings, and I won't go down that rabbit hole too far. I actually wrote a piece today on rankings. I'll post in here later. You know, all of a sudden, some of the data that we had that ranking agencies had before aren't going to be as accurate. Does that mean that all of a sudden Dickinson or Illinois or Drexel are any less a quality education than they were last year? Probably not. And so if that's true, do we need rankings, right? That's a conversation for another time. We are getting close to, let's take this one last question, and then I'll do the last question. What do you think about bulleted counselor recommendations?
I think it's perfectly fine. I mean, what I've said to students this year, we only require one teacher letter of recommendation, But, we have students that they want 2, they want 3, they want 4. And I've tried to say to students this year, above all others, recognize the extra work teachers are doing. I would say recognize the extra work counselors are doing at this point because of just the way things are playing out. So let's not make it harder. I am perfectly fine with bulleted pieces of information on a student. I don't need lengthy narratives. Chances are we already have a good handle on the student and you're confirming that for us. So tight bulleted points are great. I think if that helps you, that's going to help us.
Great. All right, we're getting close to the bewitching hour here, and you all have been great to give us so much time. We'll go in reverse order this time. We'll start with Mike and then go Kathy and then Andy. If you were to go back and do this over, or if knowing what you know now and after 20, 30 years in this profession, what would you have done differently as a student, or what would you tell your younger self now if you were going through this to do differently?
Well, my search was a very successful one, and so successful that I think that's why I'm here now. I loved college so much that I never wanted to leave, and kind of found my way into admissions as a way to stay connected to that great undergraduate experience. But a lot of that was by luck because I didn't know what I was doing in my college search process. And if I had to go about it again, I would really just look at a wider array of institutions. And I didn't really know about small liberal arts colleges, for example. And there were some that I knew of, but I didn't know at the time that they were small liberal arts colleges. They were just smaller schools that weren't, I grew up in Montgomery County outside of Philadelphia. So there were smaller schools that weren't Pitt or Penn State. I knew about them, but I didn't know that they were small liberal arts colleges. And, I often just relied on either schools that I knew of because, saw them on TV or somebody's brother or sister went there and just sort of word of mouth. But I would take more control over my own research and find places that appealed to me based on my own search and not just recommendations. Not that I wouldn't take advice from other people, but I would just take way more control. You mentioned rankings. I've never liked them, no matter where I worked. And, I've worked at places that have been ranked at all different ends of the spectrum, and I never cared about them because I'm opinionated. And I think a lot of us in admissions, whether we admit it or not, can be very opinionated, and certainly about something like higher ed because I'm passionate about it. But I don't need a magazine to tell me what school, this school is better than this school. And, some of it really depends anyway on so many different factors. So I would just take more control and seek out a lot of places, start sort of with a big funnel and then, make it smaller as I made my way through doing research.
That's great. Thanks. Kathy?
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 4 and we're all first generation college. And so my sister set the bar incredibly high with, getting a scholarship to college. Then it was like, ooh, shoot, we're all gonna have to do something. But for me, my parents didn't have that opportunity and they believe and still believe, in education is a great opportunity for all, not just for some, but for all. And so, we had a guidance counselor who covered the gamut of everything, and it was before the rankings, the 1983 is when I finished high school. So, the rankings and marketing colleges, right? Somebody mentioned earlier, I think Mike, you did, about the catalogs, right? That was the marketing piece. You got a catalog in the mail. There weren't any pictures. It was all words, and it was policy and it was nothing like the college search of today. What I would probably do differently, like Mike, is just expand the viewpoint a little bit, understand better what happens at different types of colleges and universities. I landed at Dickinson. I didn't set out looking for a small private liberal arts college. I landed here. Truth be told, the Washington Redskins used to have their training camp here. My dad thought that would be a great idea to stop and watch them play. That's how I got introduced to the college, right? I've been here ever since. But things happen. You show up in different spaces and you learn from those moments. And I would just say, I think students are overwhelmed with information today. There's too much marketing, there's too much email, there's too much whatever. And it's a lot of busyness. And maybe if we could go back to, let's start at the beginning about why go to college? What's the value? That might help allow less of the rankings and, the name, and more of this is the right place for me to get the education I need for the future I want to have.
That's great. That's great.
We shouldn't have sent those 7 million emails this last year.
No, Andy, no. I'm thinking you might want to pull a few of those back.
delete. All right, Andy, bring us home.
I would say that I listened to my high school counselor, but I did not believe him. And if I had to do it again, I would have believed him that everything would have been fine. I would have not stressed so much in my senior year that I was, not going to get the right college that I wanted to, and to the point where I didn't enjoy my senior year, didn't focus on, spending time with friends, didn't really enjoy those traditions that I had the privilege to be able to be exposed to, that some of our current freshmen didn't get the opportunity to do. And so I would say, if I was to give any advice, it'd be to listen to your high school counselor and to trust their advice.
Man, I'll end on that. I didn't pay him to say that either. Well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate your wisdom and taking the time to be with us, and like Mike said earlier, for being being in this for the right reasons and being in it as educators. And so we're really grateful. And Mike, you lucked out. We've run out of time, so we're gonna have to wait for you to serenade us on another night.
Next time.
Yeah. But thank you all, and good luck as we go into the rest of the fall. And everyone, will be back in 2 weeks with another Thursday Night Live, the second to last for the fall, before we go into hibernation. So have a great night, and stay well and be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.